All right. Are you on? Or what's your plan? We're excited. Okay, it keeps wanting to move. All right, we are ready to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for our Museum After Hours program. My name is Sarah Bell. I am the director of the Kansas Museum of History. So some of you may be aware that we're undergoing just a little renovation of our museum gallery. It's been going on for a few years. I am really excited to announce that we are just a few months away from opening. Please put November 22nd on your calendar. Yes. Woo. It's going to be a fast and furious next few months, but it's really exciting to be this close. Our big reopening day is November 22nd. And so just follow us on social media if you don't already, or stay up to date with our e-newsletter for more details to come. But what's been fun is I know I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. You all have been hanging with us this year with some of our different sneak peek tours and behind the scenes. And it's been nice to get to show kind of these different pieces, parts of the Historical Society. And we've gotten a nice look back at our anniversary in honor of our 150th anniversary. But tonight we're taking a bit of a different approach. And we're going to be looking at an in-depth look at our new special exhibit that'll be opening when we open in November. And so for those of you who are on the tour, you got a chance to see some of that in progress. And you're going to hear a lot more about it from our two guests here tonight. So let me introduce them, and I'll hand it over to them. First up is Andrea Etzel. She has been the editor of the Kansas magazine at Kansas Tourism since 2014. Prior to that, she worked at the Children's Discovery Center as their marketing director when they opened in 2011. Andrea earned her Bachelor of Arts in Photography from the Savannah College of Art and Design. She is also a proud Topeka native and a graduate of Topeka High, where she currently sits as the board president of the Topeka High School Historical Society. Let's hear it for Andrea. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Oh, and let me say, we have a couple of multi-generation Kansans with us. It's not me, sadly. I am a newbie, although I love this adopted state of mine. But we have Andrea, who is a 5th-generation Kansan and a 3rd-generation photographer. And in her spare time, you can find Andrea exploring Kansas as the Prairie Wanderer. All right, and now Ann Dorcey. Ann is the exhibits designer for the Kansas Museum of History. Ann creates exhibit layout designs and assists with exhibit construction. She also uses her graphic design skills for additional projects. A native of Emporia, Ann has a bachelor's degree in graphic design and history from Pittsburgh State University. And she completed her master's degree in history from Pittsburgh State in December of 2023. Ann developed a love for Kansas history as a teenager and worked as a tour guide at the Kansas State Capitol before joining the museum staff. She views her current position as her dream job and enjoys being part of keeping Kansas history alive. A 6th-generation Kansan, Ann can trace her Kansas roots back to the 1870s. And Ann has accomplished several exhibit projects in the almost 3 years she's been here, including On the Move, a temporary exhibit that featured the story of when the museum moved from downtown to its current location, See Kansas, which is currently on display in the gallery right across from us, and the special exhibit, opening in just a few months, celebrating Kansas, which tells 80 years of stories from the Kansas magazine. Ann's designs are fun, creative, and often inspired by historical graphic styles. And I can say we are very lucky to have her on staff. And with that, I'll hand it over.
All right, thank you. So first off, can everybody hear me? Because I've been playing a lot with this thing. All right, we're good. All right. If it falls off, it's going to happen. That's just how my life goes. So it will go flying at some point because I talk with my hand. But anyways, I wanted to start here is just kind of a collection of some of our covers from the last 80 years from when we started as an 8-page newsletter all the way up to the beautiful glossy magazine we know and love today. So I appreciate the introduction, but I also wanted to share, so I am the editor and publisher of Kansas Magazine. I work for this Department of Commerce in the Kansas tourism. So we are the travel division, promoting all the things there are to go and see and do. And one of my main priority is Kansas Magazine, but I'm blessed to be able to work on a lot of other creative fun projects, do photography, and help with other publications and design work as well. As she said, I am a 5th-generation Kansan. My family kind of comes from all over. We were in Atchison, we were in Garden City, we were in Wichita, we were in Anthony. I could keep going, but somehow they all came together in Topeka. And so my family's been in Topeka since the early 1900s. Graduated Topeka High. I joined Kansas Magazine in 2014. I am a self-proclaimed history geek, and so this project was perfect for me. And then I'm also a Kansas Explorer member. And my dog, I have a dog, a little beagle. Her name is Amelia. She is named after Amelia Earhart. So I just keep that going through. And I do have my contact information. It's small, but anybody who would like to reach out to me, please do, especially if you have story ideas. We're always looking for new ideas for the magazine. So, and I would love to hear your stories. If you have stories about the magazine, if you're a subscriber, or if you remember getting it, your grandparents getting it. That's how I started my introduction into Kansas Magazine. I remember when my grandparents were receiving it, and I can still go back to old covers going, hey, I saw that at grandma's house. So, but what we really came here to talk about is Kansas. Now, when it was founded in November of 1945, it went with a different title. It was actually called To the Stars. And the mission of the magazine at that time was very different than the mission we have today. It was started, so 1945, World War II has ended, and there's an industrial boom happening. And so there was a commission in Kansas founded, the Kansas Industrial Development Commission. It doesn't roll right off the tongue, was founded, and it was actually their one of their assistant directors, Maurice Fager. He was the one who decided in 1945 that Kansas needed some type of publication to promote Kansas as a booming industry, as a place where people should bring their businesses, aviation, even outside of agriculture, aviation, all types of business. And the first editor was Robert Halliday. He was the publicity director for the commission. So it was called To the Stars, which goes well with, Ad Astra per Aspera. Their goal was to go to the stars, similar to what our tourism slogan is today, To the Stars. So when they first started publishing, it was an 8-page newsletter. And that's where it pretty much stayed from 1945 to 1957. It grew over time, but it always kind of kept that newsletter look until when it was became monthly in 1945. Nope, sorry, 1954. And in 1949 is when it went from the newsletter to more of the magazine format we know today. And then in 1951 is when we had our first color cover. Some of the other highlights that happened kind of during this To the Stars time was we covered when James Arnez and the Gunsmoke crew came to Dodge City. So we will talk about that in our temporary exhibit. The first magazine to be fully in color was in 1967. It was also around that time period when we changed over to fully Kansas exclamation point. So that is its title. It changed over in May of 1957, which is what we still know it today as presently. In 1964, the magazine went from being published monthly to being published every 2 months. And then in the fall of 1977, we went from a free publication to actually then requiring subscription. So the other things that happened during this time was another story that I think was fun to cover, but I didn't get it into the exhibit, was in 1962, Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer played golf in Hutchinson at the Prairie Dunes golf course, and the magazine was there to cover it. I thought that was exciting. One of the editors I'll be talking about in the future, Don Richards, he was not only an editor for the magazine, but he was also a photographer. And it was during this time period that he shot his last assignment with us, which happened in 1976. He was doing a story for the Menninger Clinic. Oh. So to talk about some of the notable editors, so I just mentioned Don Richards. He was editor for 11 years, from 1953 to 1964. He was a K-State graduate in industrial journalism, and he was hired in 1951 as to be the staff photographer, but also the assistant editor. And he edited through, like I said, he left the magazine in 1964, but then he continued to do photography assignments for the magazine all the way through the 1970s. Then we had Frances Smith. She was also with the magazine for 11 years, but she joined the magazine at the same time that Dawn did in 1951. Frances was the first female editor for the magazine, and she was quite an accomplished woman. In 1966 is when she became editor. She was also the president of the Women Journalist, the Kansas Women's Journalist. She became the Women's Journalist of the Year in 1970, and then she retired from the magazine in 1977. And then I think the editor that most know from Kansas Magazine's history is Andrea Glenn. And Andrea was editor for over 20 years, from 1978 to 2001. She was also a graduate of K-State. She became editor, like I said, in 1978. But under her guidance is when the magazine really flourished. And I don't think we would have the magazine that we know today if it wasn't for Andrea, because it was really under her guidance that it went from being this industrial publication to then it started to morph into more of that leisure, lifestyle, travel, tourism. There was more profiles on artists. There were more profiles on the humanities. It really just grew. It became a more robust magazine. We still talked a little bit about business, but it definitely, you notice a switch. And just the design work through that time. Duke Senegal's we had, or Galen is what he went by. For 30 years, he was our art director in the magazine. And a lot of the artwork that he created, his watercolors, and using to really edit or really embellish the panels in there. So it's great to see that work continued. But that reader in lifestyle magazine really is attributed to Andrea's vision. And it was also under Andrea that she I think was a little bit of a visionary, because she really thought outside of the box. It was under her that we had several books published, which I have brought them here. I'm worried that if I bend down, the mic will go. But I'm happy to show them to you guys. But it was also under Andrea that we have the calendar that we still have today. So if you get your winter issue in November, you get your calendar then. We'll start getting calls usually in September. I haven't received my calendar. It comes in November. So if any of you here, it comes in November, you will still get it. We just picked the final photos a couple of weeks ago. I think you're really going to like it. But the first it started in the 80s, and the first few calendars were actually stitched into the magazine. But now you actually get a really beautiful wall calendar. And it was also under Andrea that we had our first kids edition of Kansas. It was called Kansas 2, Kansas TOO. And I'm excited to say that actually this year we brought a version of a Kansas Kids magazine back. It's called Kansas Kids, but the mission is very similar. It's to hopefully engage and inspire those young minds to fall in love with their state. So even if they do move away, they are enticed to come back. And I know that's what a lot of people do, is they send out the magazines to their grandkids, hopefully not only letting them know what's happening home, but come back home. Sadly, Andrea did pass away in 2001, and it was kind of an end of the era for the magazine. But still, what she did then, I hope we're still following that mission today. Okay, so why an exhibit? Again, I'm a history geek, and I'm kind of stealing this idea from another magazine. We're a state-owned publication. There's not many magazines out there that are run by state government offices, but there's a handful. New Mexico Magazine is one of them. And thankfully, we have a really good relationship just on publishing a magazine because there's not many people I can go to who understand the same obstacles, we'll say, of trying to run a magazine in a government. And they celebrated their 100th, and I saw they did a museum exhibit, and I was like, hey, we can do a museum exhibit too. So now please, if you can see the dates, ignore them, because Sarah and I were talking and I realized I got my years off because I was like, it was 2023. And she's like, no, it's 2024. And I'm like, oh, time is just completely we've been working on this for a while. So I wanted to not just celebrate the magazine, but I really wanted to pay homage to and honor those who brought the magazine to where it is today. And I had some numbers because I was curious. So in the 80 years, we've had 13 editors. And then over that same period of time, and these numbers are a little rough because when it was a newsletter between the 40s through maybe halfway through the 50s, they didn't credit writers and they didn't credit photographers. So from what I can tell, we've had over 300 photographers and over 300 writers write for the magazine. Michael Snell, whose father was Joseph Snell, who was a previous executive director of the museum, he's the photographer who's done the most assignments for us. And one of our current writers, Cecilia Harris, she lives in Abilene. She's phenomenal. She's so far as the writer who's written the most stories for the magazine. We have featured over 500 attractions or businesses. And the most featured attraction is the Eisenhower Boyhood Home Museum and Library. We followed that when it was first an idea, then we followed it through when it was being built, and now we continually follow it as it's opened as an attraction, which if you haven't been to it since they did the renovation, please go. It is amazing. So the most featured event, I thought it was going to be the liberal pancake theories because we cover that a lot, especially in the 50s and 60s when it was a fairly new event. But actually the Medicine Lodge Peace Treaty pageant beat it out just a little bit. The most featured person, since I already talked about his Museum of Boyhood home, Dwight Eisenhower is the person we have featured the most in the magazine. But next would be Gordon Parks. We featured him next. The most historic moment that we have featured is the Santa Fe Trail. The year that the Santa Fe Trail celebrated its 150, it just celebrated its 200th. We did a magazine dedicated to it, but I think it was the year it celebrated 150 or 175. That whole year, every issue of the magazine had a piece dedicated to the Santa Fe Trail. And the business that we featured most, because that's how we started, was as a business magazine, was Cessna. So those are just some of the quick little factoids that I was able to pull up. But it really does truly take a village. Going back to the tributing the hundreds is because when we really try to work and make sure that we produce a Kansas product. So all of our writers are from Kansas. All of our photographers live in Kansas. All of our illustrators, all of our artists. We are a magazine that is for Kansans by Kansans. And each issue, when it comes out, I will send out complimentary copies to each person who was featured in that magazine, whether it was business attraction or a writer or a photographer. And on average, I send out probably 50 to 80 complimentary copies to those individuals. So 50 to 80 in each issue. So it really does take a large group of people to make a magazine. And that doesn't include those who work behind the scenes in the printing or in circulation. That's just in the pages of the magazine. So those are who we wanted to celebrate. So the conversation started with, we had a team meeting, both tourism and the historical society. We all came together. It was March 24, ignore that. And I said, hey, do you guys have an idea for a temporary exhibit? And Sarah was like, no. And I said, hey, I have an idea. And she was like, good idea. We're trying to open the main museum. And she was like, would you do the script? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but sure, let's do it. And so she sent me examples. And I think I tried and thankfully she was wonderful to work with, because I would often go and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Does it make sense? And thankfully we got there. But a lot of it was researching the history of the magazine. And that wasn't just me going through our archives, but I was really trying to dig deep into when we created that timeline. I wanted to really find out, like, who are these past editors? When did they come? Who were, the photographers? And I learned a lot of interesting things, went down some very interesting rabbit holes, as one does when they're researching. Thankfully, I have to give my coworkers a giant shout out because I would often be like, hey, you want to hear something? And they'd be like, sure. Thankfully, they listened and cheered on to all my weird factoids that I would share to them. There's a rooster. I won't go into the whole thing because I think everybody here has heard about my Just Bill the Rooster story. He's featured in the exhibit. So just come back and learn about Just Bill the Rooster, the Hollywood rooster from the 1948. But just really interesting items to go through. Some of the resources they use, not just our archives, I use the state archives to dig through. I use newspapers.com a lot. And we also, at the Kansas State Library, there's a resource where they will document and archive past annual reports from the Commerce and other agencies. So I was able to go back through a lot of those and learn more about the history. So it's been interesting. I submitted the draft of the exhibit earlier this year and then spent the summer working with Anne and the team to finalize the exhibit. So some of the interesting things I learned. So this Kansas cover, I was just flipping through and then I saw a name and I was like, wait, that can't be the right name. And it was P. Souza. I'm going to say his name wrong. P. Souza. So he was, if you didn't know, he was a White House photographer. He was the White House photographer for both President Reagan and also President Obama. He has worked for Life magazine. He's worked for National Geographic. He's a big photographer. And I was like, how? What? So he's a graduate of K-State. And he actually got his start in photojournalism in Chanute and Hutchinson. And when he was at Hutchinson in 1981, I don't know how it came to be, but somebody got a hold of this photo, whether he submitted it or somebody reached out to him and said, hey, but we have one of his photos as our cover for the winter of 1981. This was the golf story I was talking about. So I don't know if that's Arnold Palmer or if that's Jack. I don't know my golfers. I apologize. That's Palmer. That's Palmer. Sorry, don't know my golf history. But I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're in the front. I know the drink. So the other thing, so I talked about Cessna earlier. What I didn't know, but I learned through our magazine, is they didn't just make planes, they also made furniture. So they had their own line of mid-century modern furniture. And so that's the desk from their furniture line. And then one of the things that happened while I was researching is we have the docking building, and we covered it, of course, when the docking building opened. Well, fun fact, we're moving. So the Department of Commerce is moving into the new docking building. We've been in Curtis, but come this fall, we are moving into the new docking building. So that means not only Department of Commerce, but Kansas Tourism and the magazine. So I'm really looking forward to that. But so I had to get the docking building in there. Okay. So I don't know if we want to do questions just yet. Do we want to pass to Anne first and then we'll, okay. So.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I didn't do a, okay, great. All right. So my name's Ann Dorcey. I am the exhibits designer, as Sarah already introduced myself. With this project, I was given it and I was kind of like a dream come true in a way. I have loved Kansas Magazine since I started my journey with Kansas history back when I was like, oh gosh, like 13 or 14. And it was a big inspiration for me because seeing this magazine and seeing the history and art and graphic design come together with people appreciating our state was a huge inspiration for me to go into history and art. And so it's kind of like full circle now to come work with Andrea and come work at the museum and do this project. So it was really fun to work on, and I'm still working on it actually. There's more stuff that's going to be added as the ones that were here went through the gallery. We have the timeline that we need to put up, and then there's going to be a big statewide section. So we're still developing it, but what I have so far and what you guys have seen, I'm really happy with and really happy to share with you guys. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of the process of exhibit design. And it's a little confusing at times what I do. I go home and I tell my parents or I tell my friends and they're like, "What did you do today?" And it's always something different. I was trained as a graphic designer. I went to Pittsburgh State and I was trained in printmaking and then also digital design. So when I came here, I wanted to try and be as useful as possible. So when I was getting ready to graduate, Nate Forsberg isn't here, but he's the director of the exhibits. We were driving back from Fort Hayes and he was just asking me what my plans were after I was going to get my master's. And I said, I might go to trade school and learn how to weld so I could be helpful with the welding. And he looked at me and said, I can teach you. So now I know how to weld. So that's another. I did not weld the stuff for this project, but I have done welding for the museum and we'll do more. So getting into the exhibit, so what happens with the design process? So as Andrea already said, the first step is just kind of talking about what is the overview of what we want to do for this. And that's the same with any kind of graphic design. You always meet with the client. So for the Kansas Museum of History, our client is Kansas Magazine. So I found this nice flow chart online of you have the concept. So the concept was, telling the history of Kansas Magazine. And then as Andrea did, the research and then object selection. We have artifacts that are going along with it. And then the planning and publication development, that's kind of a really fancy term for graphic design. So it's just kind of the layout, budget preparation, and then design, installation, and programming. Again, this is kind of just a big overview of what I found online for this. Here's what it looked like for this process.
That's my brain.
Yeah, this is kind of like the idea or what it looks like in our minds. So this is the best way to visualize it. A lot of back and forth. And it's not always straightforward. As we have a lot of material here, we have a huge archive collection that we can go through. We're always finding new and great pictures. And that was kind of a big part of this process with me, is that Andrea went through and gave the script, which I think the first slide, yes. So here is an example of what we call a script. Andrea, I think you can attest the fact that you were learning of what a script is. And so with this, you can see this is just a Word document, but on one side we have what the item will be. At the bottom part there is our first section. So the Northeast section, and then what the title is. So it's divided up and it's nice and organized. And then I'm not sure if everyone can see, but on the top line, we have exhibit ID, element, text, word count, edited text, and then I had some edits that I made myself. So usually on the element line, it is kind of what our direction is. So we have their intro text and then about how many words max on there. And then the next line down is the direction of what we should do for this. So on this, the suggestion was a map of Kansas with 6 regions and then a color-coded map. Andrea provided me the color coding for Kansas tourism. So it's 2 different kind of blues. It's a purple, red, and then a yellow, I believe. And I can't list all of them off right now, but you'll see when the exhibit opens. But for example, for Northeast Kansas, since this section's right here, it is dark blue. So that kind of just gives me some direction. This is what I would like to call the intro panel. So when the exhibit opens, it'll be when people first walk in, they'll see a little bit of this text just kind of welcoming people in. And so what I brought with me to kind of show this is, so this is just one page of it. This is the whole script. It is pretty
intimidating.
Yeah, I can't flip through it too well, but it's pretty long and it looks like there's a lot of text in it, which there is, but it's kind of just the main part of this is just for me to lay out what is going to go in the exhibit. And since I also have to deal with the pictures as well, it's just trying to figure out how do I section this off. So I'll get into a little bit later of how the panels looked. Again, you guys saw kind of what the structure will look like, but for the people at home, the idea for this, of course, was to look like a magazine. So this is, the first step. You get a script. And then for me, I start already thinking about what is this going to look like to a person? And so in an exhibit, I mean. And so you I like to say for designers, and I'm sure for writers, it's the same thing too. There's no such thing as an original thought. You are always getting ideas from other people. If you thought you had original thought, you haven't when it comes to artwork. So of course, you know, for me, I like to go on Pinterest and find ideas. So on the left-hand side, you see up there, that is an exhibit, I believe from the Rolling Stone. I don't know what exhibit it was. I've seen it quite a bit, but it says letters to the editor on it. So my idea, even if this wasn't what the exhibit they had in mind is that what is better for a exhibit on on a magazine than to deconstruct the magazine and physically walk through it. And we're walking through the Kansas history of it. So that's kind of the idea I had for it. So I had my inspiration for what the exhibit kind of would look like, at least deconstructed. And then of course on this side, I took some pages out of articles throughout the years and just tried to get like a good idea of what the magazine looks like now compared to how it looks like, you know, let's say 50 years ago. And just trying to see how can I replicate this as best as possible. And luckily the design of the magazine, it's, you know, there's a style guide, which for you that don't know what a style guide is, it's usually the term, well, it can come in a document where it's saying this is the type of font we use for certain sections, this is the sizing that we use, and there's a little wiggle room depending on how much text, the type of pictures. As you can see, some of these are a little bit more text heavy, but generally they kind of all look like they come from the same magazine, and that's ideally what you would do in any sort of graphic design, and especially with publication work, you want it to all look the same, hence a style guide. So, you know, once I got a good understanding of what this looked like, it was time to kind of start the design process. Oh, and then, like I said, the structures. So this is also inspiration I pulled from Pinterest of like, how are we going to do these structures? And as everyone who is here in person saw, it's a big room. You know, if you can imagine that a day ago, there was nothing in there. It was just a big empty room. And so you got to fill it up with something. And, you know, typically you would think, oh, we can put it on the walls, but we'd like to, you know, fill up the space with more than just cases. So I started looking and I was thinking, you know, what kind of structure can we put out there? And then the idea came to me, and I don't know if it was me or Nate or if it was kind of a combination of ours, but you know, we're walking through a magazine. That's kind of the idea of this exhibit, is that to make the panels look like a magazine itself. So this is SketchUp. This is the program that I use for 3D modeling. It's pretty simple. Most museum designers use this, architectural drawing as well. So this is kind of what the layout initially looked like. And you can see I have what is a preview of what the timeline will look like in the future. But you can see these structures where they have legs on them, but it's supposed to look like a magazine literally opened up. And the back sides will have a cover and then like a back cover on it as well. So, but the internal pages is where the main content will go. And there is 6 of these, as you saw in person, but it's supposed to represent each of the 6 regions. Each one is color coded to kind of match what's going on with that. In this one, you can kind of see it a little bit, the blue that I was talking about for the Northeast region. That's all the text, or most of the text is used for that, to kind of showcase that. And then, oh, well, so let me get into like kind of the graphic style that I went for this. Because that's probably for me the most important of like, you know, when you're designing something, what is the feeling you want to invoke with the viewer? And for this, you know, the exhibit is called Celebrating Kansas, and I see it as a double meaning. We want to celebrate the magazine itself, but we want to celebrate the state. So we're kind of doing a 2-in-1. So what really struck me as I was going through, Andrea sent me a bunch of covers that were really great, and it kind of started me on my way to figure out what will this look like. The one that you see on the left there is the 40th anniversary, and it's very simplistic, but it's such a fun design that it just was very striking to me. And it will be replicated for the 80th anniversary in the exhibit. It'll be in the intro panel when you first walk in. But here are some other examples of some of the pages from over the years that I just pulled from. I believe that one's probably from the 50s. I think the next one's from the 60s. And then the one on the bottom with Chicken Annie and Chicken Mary's, I believe that's from 90s. Yeah. And So when I was doing this project, I got some of the images for this, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to find some more because, as Andrea said, they did multiple articles on the same subject. So liberals, pancake race, that was covered. I was surprised when you said that that wasn't the most because
I know.
I saw it so many times. I for sure thought it would be the most covered
Me too.
subject. But so to find images, I came in here into the library room and I bothered the archive staff many times about finding images. And we here have almost a comprehensive collection of all the articles throughout the years from 1945 to current. And I have to give a shout out to Lisa and Jennifer that work in the archives for scanning everything for me. There was over 600 pages that was scanned. Not 600, I'm sorry, 300, but still it felt like 600 probably to them. Of just going through 80 years worth of content just to find related images. And going through this project on some of the panels, let's say again for the pancake race, I used 3 different images for that. They're all from completely different articles from different decades because I wanted to showcase the progress of the magazine. So let me go back a little bit. One of the best things about it was Galen's artwork, and that's what will be in the intro section too, and it's kind of cut off. It's a big image. It was for a article celebrating festivals in Kansas, but his artwork was so just very huge inspiration for this, very colorful, very inviting. And so that was kind of trying to integrate using old articles with new articles, just trying to blend in the art styles as much as I can while making it still feel like the current magazine. So, so getting into that, here's an example of some of the panels. These are panels that you guys did not see in the gallery tonight, but just giving a little preview. So part of the progress on doing an exhibit is there's always going back and editing over and over, hence the picture with all the lines going to and fro. So on the left-hand side, that was kind of the first version of the panels that I did. And I showed Sarah and, everyone said, this looks good, but it felt very tight. There was things that I personally did not like about that version of the panel that is now changed. So in this one, or in the new one, which I think I have on a later slide, Amelia has her own page, which, she is a big influential person in Kansas history. I think that was very important to give her own page. But also, I think I wanted to showcase Festa Mexicana because I thought this is an event that, people outside of Topeka probably don't know as much about. And I thought it's important to showcase. So that actually got moved to its own panel. And it's, it kind of breaks my own style guide that I was originally setting for this exhibit to create its own for its page where it's just more colorful. I pulled the title card therefore and from an old article, and all the colors were pulled from the old article as well. And I felt like it kind of created its own special page. And in Kansas Magazine, I realized as well that that's kind of how it is each article is its own story. So that's kind of what I wanted to have this feeling evoke for this part of the exhibit. So really, that's kind of all I had for my part of this. Any questions anyone had?
One thing I'll add is that on not necessarily each of the panels, but each of the sections will have a QR code. That QR code can get scanned and that will take them to a web page on our website that will have the stories and will go more in depth into celebrating the anniversary. So they'll just get a little snippet, and if you scan it, then you can read more.
I'll start off with the first question. How do I become a subscriber for the magazine? I don't have one.
I'm so glad you are. Well, first off, I'm assuming everybody here already is.
Of course, right. This is, yes.
Because you guys are my people. So, well, one, you can go to our website, kansasmag.com, and you can easily subscribe right through there. There's also, I brought some issue from earlier this year. It's on the back table. I'm hoping there was enough for everybody. I just grabbed a box and came. But there's subscription cards into it. But that issue back there is a special issue. It has Jim Richardson on the cover. We did that one in February. He is archiving his life's work right now, which I can only imagine what that is taking. But so we covered the story, but we also covered the Historical Society celebrating its 150th anniversary in that issue. So if you don't have it, please grab it. There's a subscription card in it. I'll sign you up before I leave. We'll get it done if you need it. Thank you, Sarah.
While you all are thinking of some questions, some of you who went on the tour heard this already, but I wanted to just emphasize something that I think is so great about what we do here with our exhibits in-house. So this is something we're profiling our special exhibit space. This is temporary exhibits we rotate through every 6 to 12 months. And we're going to get back on that schedule when we reopen. So the main gallery is we are partnering with Dimensional Innovations, DI. They are responsible for designing and fabricating all those exhibits. They have a full shop. They're doing everything in their shop. They're bringing it here to install. Everything in the special exhibit space is ours. And these structures and these pieces that you see, we're not buying them from someone else. Someone else isn't making these. We are creating these in-house. And so to Anne's comment about, wanting to go learn to weld, many years ago, we had many more staff here, and there was carpenters and welders because everything was fabricated here. We have a much smaller team, but this capable team that we have is able to create and build everything here. And I just think that is just a remarkable quality that we are able to provide at the museum. And from a budget perspective, but also from a really creative perspective, because Nate and Anne can dream up exactly what they want this to look like, and then they figure out how to build it. What a great quality. So I just wanted to emphasize that again, because I just think that is something that is really special and unique for us. Okay, any other questions you have for Andrea or Anne? Yes.
Mine's more for Andrea, about the magazine. What process do you kind of go through, like get articles? Do photos get submitted, or like you talk about like the pancake race gets talked about? Do you like plan that out? Like, oh, we're going to talk about the pancake race this year. How does
Sure.
it go about creating
That's a great
articles?
question. So we are right now, I should also say that, so the magazine's produced 5 times a year. So we went to seasonal in like the 60s, 70s. So it was 4 times. And then in 2021, we added an issue. So we're 5 times a year now. And we are usually start working on a magazine about a year before we actually publish it. And so it starts with usually myself, the editorial team, our staff at tourism to look at the next year and go, okay, what's big happening that we want to cover? So going into 2026, Route 66 is turning 100. We have the World Cup coming, America 250 is happening. So these were all things that we were already starting to be like, okay, we need to make sure we have some components of these in the next year. And we kind of start with themes and then try to think of what stories will work around those themes. Or if somebody's having an anniversary or a celebration, we try to make those. So and as much as I can, I try to stick to seasonal, because if somebody's getting something in winter, if everything's just summer and everybody's in their shorts, or worse, it's summer and the trees are all no leaves. I don't want people thinking that's what Kansas is in the summertime, because we know it's not. We know it's not, because people outside of Kansas also read the magazine. So those are kind of the components. And then we will send those ideas out to our list of writers and photographers, and they will come back to us with some story ideas. But we also may have like, nope, this is a story we want to tell. This is the direction we want to tell it from. We are always looking for photographers. So in each issue of the magazine, there's a gallery section. And so we're always asking photographers to submit their images to us to either be featured in the gallery section of the magazine, to be featured in the calendar, or we do now have a single image section of the magazine. It's called Kansas Captured. And the goal of that is just to capture that one moment. It wasn't staged. It was just the photographer was in the right place at the right time, and it's pure Kansas. And so we are always, now we do pay everybody. That's always the question we get is, well, are they paid? Yes, they're paid. We pay for a one-time use. If we use your photo again, we'll pay you again. You maintain all the ownership. And then people do reach out to us and ask, with story ideas. So that's a little bit of everything, but usually internally it starts with a theme and then we go from there. It's not a golf question, is it?
Not about Arnold Palmer. Do you know he smoked?
Did he? I assumed everybody smoked back
He
then.
smoked. But this isn't about Arnold.
Okay.
What was this about? Am I going to forget
I'm
what this is
sorry.
about? Do other libraries around the United States, like when you go to a library in another city, in another state, very often you'll see Arizona magazine, which is a very popular
It is,
magazine.
it's
It's well
beautiful
done,
magazine. I've had people send me that magazine and say, hey, why don't you be
Yeah.
more like them?
but when,
I know what magazine you're talking about.
well, the point I'm making, the question I have is, do other libraries around the United States, do you routinely send Kansas magazine to them for them to,
That's a
or
good
not?
question.
Because they should have this magazine, I would think.
I agree. So we don't necessarily to out-of-state libraries. Any library that would like to subscribe, mostly that's how that's going to happen is there are library services that can receive special subscriptions and they can get magazines. I'll be honest, we haven't like specifically marketed to that, but they could be out there. I will also say that we are part of so that people can, as we move more and more into the digital age, there are digital versions of our magazine. And if you are a Libby reader, if you have the Libby app or Overdrive, the magazine is, I shouldn't tell you that because now you won't subscribe. Anyways, the magazine is on those things. So people from out of state, I'm assuming, I mean, I'm a member of the Topeka Shawnee County Library and I can see it. I assume people that's a good idea, something to think of. Thank you.
I think for me, holding a magazine in my hand beats digital. I'm an old guy,
agree.
but wow. I mean,
I'm old school, so I totally agree
I
with
would
that.
think if you could get it in lots of libraries, it would help.
No, I agree. Thank you.
I'm going to ask another question because your point about print makes me wonder, have you all, I know newspapers are going through some
Mhm.
challenges with
Mhm.
print and readership. Do you feel like recently you have faced any of those challenges with print versus wanting it to be digital or?
Honestly, from our readers, we don't hear digital. Our advertisers, we often hear like, hey, we'd like a digital product. So, but I often don't hear too much from our current readers like we want a digital, but I think it's good to be where the reader's at. So if the reader's looking for something digitally, that we're there. But I think, yeah, I agree. We're very tactile people, and I think it's really important to hold it. And the pictures just come alive more when you're looking on the beautiful glossy than yeah. So I get it. I subscribe to both. I have print and then I do look at the digital sometimes. It's usually when I'm looking for inspiration. I like the digital because I can take screenshots and I can save them on my Pinterest board. And the print, my coworkers hear me ripping paper out all the time. That's my other way of trying to say things or taking photos of an intro. So it is nice to have digital if I'm looking for design, but for story ideas, I like paper. Mary.
Have you thought about making this a traveling exhibit after it's done here?
I just.
Well, we have now.
Ooh. Well, actually, not necessarily traveling, but I like that idea. I have talked to Bridget Job is the director of tourism, and I have talked, but I haven't asked you guys this, but I have a feeling in our new home we might have some space. And I've thought, well, if you guys aren't using the panels, maybe we could use the panel. So, but I like traveling exhibit more.
Good idea.
Good idea, Mary.
And what of all the different pieces you talked about Galen and illustration, but what was something else that you feel like jumped out to you and kind of your inspiration, your graphic that just really resonated with you, the most exciting part of this exhibit process?
You know, as I was going through again, I spent about probably a week here in the archives just going through all the magazines, and it's very easy to just get lost in, especially the older issues. I did find the Rooster article and I saw it and I kind of flipped past it and then I realized that was the one I needed to scan. And I was like, what, you know, there's the older articles, they have very interesting stuff. A lot of it's more industry because it was owned or ran by, what was the industry or Commerce and Industry Commission.
It's Kansas Industrial Development Commission.
Yeah, some very boring title like that. But anyway, but there's, you know, some of the businesses that no longer exist was in there and just very interesting articles. So as I was going, it just kind of putting a bunch of, you know, checkpoints saying, I need to go back to that. I did bring this along. I forgot to talk about this. So I did bring an example of one of the panels that I was not able to get put up for this exhibit. Yeah, so yeah. So I went to school in Pittsburgh, and who here, raise your hand, have you been down to Pittsburgh? Have you seen Big Brutus? Okay, so you know this is a big deal down there. This is their pride and joy. This is Big Brutus. It is a steam shovel. And if you don't know much about Pittsburgh, big mining area, did a lot of strip mining. And so you can still see the strip mines in the area. They're these very long, they just look like long finger ponds. Anyway, so this is still there, but this is when it was still in operation. I don't know what article when this was from, but it was before it was decommissioned and rolled up on the hill and then became a museum. So this is probably one of my favorite pages, just because it's very striking. The Big Bite was the title of the article. And so it's just fun doing things like this, trying to, what will stand out in an article. So I'd flip through the magazine and I'd see a picture just like this, and I'm like, I gotta use that. So that was probably the biggest inspiration for the whole thing, is just trying to find what images will connect with people, what will be the most interesting.
And you did an amazing job of really making it look like the magazine. Like it just looks like the magazine, but blown up. So, and Big Brutus is one of those few special exhibits or attractions that we covered while it was in operation, and we've covered it since it became a museum. So it's kind of nice to be able to cover both of its lives.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got a question online.
Ooh.
How does knowing so much about your state change your daily perspective?
Oh, we're getting philosophical.
Yeah.
Who did Bridget send that question? No. No. Kansas continues to surprise me, and I think that's what I am constantly learning. And when I go and visit something, as soon as I check one thing off, I add two more things. And I just think that Kansas is a truly unexpected state, and the regions and how diverse they are. And people always ask me, like, what do I need to do in Kansas? I'm like, first thing you have to do is get off I-70. Number one, get off I-70, because you'll have a completely different experience in Kansas. You only have to go a half hour either direction, and your interpretation of Kansas is going to be completely different. So, yeah, and I love the fact that Kansas, as that says, quirky Kansas, Kansans lead into the quirky, and I just love that too.
Yeah. I have something to add to that. So just to flex a little history muscle, can't remember which of the Miniger said this, but apparently after the Depression, he diagnosed the state with an inferiority complex. I don't know how he does like a whole state, that's very conceptual to me, but he diagnosed Kansans with this inferiority complex compared to the rest of the nation in terms of, like, I guess, how well known we are. And I have to say, I probably disagree with that. I think we're more humble and we just don't brag about what we have. So then people don't understand that we have a big shovel that people down in Southeast Kansas really love. Or we have the pancake race where we're competing with a little village in England, something like that, where it's, as you said, we're a very quirky state and most people just don't realize that. So I'd say, as a Kansan, finding out these things, that's kind of my drive, is what more weird and fun stuff can I find out about the state to give it more personality? And I think that's kind of been my big drive, is, finding out what and who Kansas is.
My mission for Kansas is to be a love letter to the state, and hopefully to make Kansans fall in love with their state, like I have fallen in love with the state. So that's our mission.
One of the most important things about Kansas I haven't heard mentioned. Did you know where the Civil War started?
I know
It
I know
started here.
Yeah.
And
I
I
lived
lived
very
in a
proud of
I lived in a house that had a opening in the kitchen that went, a tunnel that went to the barn, and I lived right on what was the way that they took people. It was, what they call it, the railroad, Underground Railroad. And Elizabeth Leach she found out, her dad wrote a book about this, And she actually found the trail pretty much from the information she had and traveled it. So I think that that's a really important thing about Kansas.
Yeah. I think that's something I agree. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of the rest of the country doesn't know, that Kansas was having its own little civil war here before the actual civil war. Yeah. Yeah. Let's put it in.
So with 80 years of the magazine, it's a lot of stories, a lot of design elements. And even though it's a big space to fill, there are probably a lot of really cool stories or design elements that you weren't able to use. So what is your favorite story or photo or illustration that you weren't able to quite fit in the exhibit?
You want me to go first? Because
Yes,
I'm,
because I
okay, I'll let
was
you
thinking
think.
about the 600 stories that I went through. But there's a lot, and that was actually probably the hardest thing, was the fact that there was so much we could not share. Maybe that'll be on the website. The things that didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
Really.
So as I was going through, of course, since I have to go back and look at these images so much, and I kind of forgot to talk about that when I was doing my main part. A big part of the exhibit design, of course, and just graphic design in general, is going back and forth with the client. So I sent Andrea several drafts to kind of, make sure, hey, is this what, and we did meet and say, like, is this kind of what the direction we want to go with? So going through, of course, there's a lot of images that I have to look at over and over. And some of these images, they're more just kind of like a scan of the whole article, and they'll be featured in the timeline exhibit or section of this exhibit, where it'll be kind of like a date and then a major event that happened in that year. Like, let's say Andrea Glenn getting hired as the editor. And then what I wanted to do with that is have a cover of either from the year it happened or the exact issue where it was announced, and then an example of a story from in there to kind of show the progression, like the visual progression of how the magazine looked throughout the years. So there's a lot of ones I went back through and saw that. I think my favorite article in there, again, besides the rooster, that is a very good one. We might have to like just put that whole article online because it is from a very old magazine.
It's only little.
Yeah, it's just one page. But anyway, there was one that was on these motorcycle races in Dodge City, and I can't remember the title of what it was called or if they still go on, but just it was a 3-page article, I believe, and it was just very fun of, it's almost like the ones that happen in South Dakota, the Sturgis. And so that was a fun article. I think some of the older ones definitely have kind of interesting tidbits in there. The article on the 1952 KUN in Seattle against St. John's of New York, yes. And so, that one, we had to work with KU quite a bit to find an image on that, but, it's kind of like the first big win that we had with fog. And so that's also a very interesting article.
Yeah. For things that didn't make the cut, me personally, and I tend to be very interested sometimes in like legends and lore, things that are like sometimes the spooky. We're heading into the right season, and we have done some very interesting stories on legends, lores, haunted Kansas. None of that shows up, unfortunately. We don't talk about true crime. There were some fun stories we've done over the years.
We did talk about the Dalton gang. That is,
okay, we talk about
yeah.
the Dalton gang, Emmett Dalton, but like the last cover on the beginning.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Mind, thank you. See if I can flip all the way to the beginning really fast. So one of my it's right there. One of my all-time favorite covers is this Notorious, and that was as close as I could get to talking about true crime in Kansas Magazine, because as we are the tourism office, we don't want to talk a lot about murder happening in Kansas.
Yeah.
So I got criminals and outlaws. So we had our Notorious, we had our good guys and our bad guys. That cover actually won gold at a magazine conference that we attend. It's the International Regional Media Association, and that cover won gold. So,
and who's the artist that does that cover?
Torrin Thomas. He is a illustrator, artist. He's done several of our covers, and actually the issue that's getting ready to come out in September, he did the cover of that issue as well. I'm excited. Who here? Oh, do I spoiler alert? Do I drop what we're?
Tease-
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
tease
I'm
a little
gonna
bit.
show you because I don't have the cover. But who here knows who Sinkhole Sam was or what Sinkhole Sam was? I see two hands and they're the people who I work with. So if
I know.
them,
I know it's, yeah.
I told them about Sinkhole. No, I think they knew because that's from like your neck of the woods. Anyways, Kansas's like cryptid. He's like our Bigfoot. So we talk about Sinkhole Sam in the next issue and he's our cover.
He's a big worm, isn't he?
He's a legend. Yeah, a big worm. He's a
Yeah.
big worm in a sinkhole in Inman Lake. Sorry. So, yeah. Any more questions?
more? Well, join me in a big round of applause for Andrea and Anne.
Thank you.
Well, you can tell we have some fun here. That was a really great program. Thank you both. And I want to preview what's coming next month. So September is going to be our last museum after hours program of this year. We are going to be busy working to finish up the museum to be open in November. So we're going to take a little bit of a break for the last few months of the year. We will be returning in 2026. But for next month, we're going to be concluding our series this year with a focus on the museum. Many of you have heard me talk a lot about this renovation. You've gotten my perspective. And so I thought it would be fun for you to get to hear from DI, the designers and fabricators of this exhibit, to get their perspective on what it's been like to do this really big renovation. So I've asked them, they've agreed. And so a couple of the staff that we've been working very closely with over the last few years will be joining myself and Nate Forsberg, our exhibits director, on stage to talk about this massive renovation that we've been undertaking. And knowing them, they're going to have some great previews of some of the exhibits that you're going to get to see when we reopen November 22nd. So with that, we'll look forward to seeing you next month.